So look, thank you very much for making the time. The topic of this Work Better webinar is Michelin's formula for uptime, smarter services with hindsight. So we'll be talking not just about ourselves, but the lived experience of one of our really valuable partners, Michelin. And to that end, we have, in fact, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Dan Bourke, here today to talk a little bit more about their experience with not just the hindsight solution, but more generally around how to tackle that service delivery challenge, which we know is a big one across the METs, mining, and indeed a lot of these heavy industry sectors. Hopefully some valuable learnings there to be had and taken away today. So thank you for those who've joined. Just by way of quick introduction, if you haven't come to a Work Better webinar before, I'm Scanlan. I'm actually one of the founders of HINDSITE, and we're really excited to have this conversation today. I don't think it's spoken of enough. We go to enough conferences over the course of a year, multiple years, but I don't think about the actual challenge of making it happen is spoken of enough. And speaking of making it happen, that's why Rory Broadbridge, my other co-founder, is here on the call today. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. As Leah mentioned, my name is Rory, and probably my most important job day to day is actually as head of customer success. So I get to work with our fantastic customers, including Dan and the Michelin team, to really make sure that they're getting value from their investment in our platform, but also in their investment towards digital transformation as well. Really happy to be here.
Nice. Thanks, Rory. And then finally, it's not a conversation about making stuff happen without the lived experience. And we really appreciate Dan and his time. But most importantly, I think the candor with which Michelin and Michelin Mining have taken to this challenge. I think hopefully over the course of the next kind of half hour, you'll see a little bit more of why that lived experience is worth sharing. But Dan, I thought maybe if you would like to give us, I guess, a little bit about you and your role, we'd love to hear that first before we kick off the conversation.
Yeah, sure, Liam. Yeah, sure, no problem. Hello, everybody. My name's Daniel Bourke, as it says on the slide right there. I'm Michelin's Mining Services Development Manager for the East Asia region, which includes Australia, Indonesia, and half of Asia. And I head up a team of 6. I'm very lucky to head up a team of 6 people in the region who help us deploy mining solutions to customers to keep them safe and operating sustainably as well, too. So nice to be here and happy to partner with the HINDSITE on this as well, too.
Nice one. Look, so for those who are unfamiliar with HINDSITE, I thought I'd just very brief introduction. At the high level, we're a work management platform. And what that means is we take any part of that value chain for an industry and we want to digitize how that work gets done to ensure that ultimately the processes are followed in more better consistency, traceability, and ultimately those processes or those technologies are better adopted, which will be a bit of the story we're going to tell here today. My background, I'm ex-BHP, but across the hundreds of businesses that we've worked with in our time, we find that this is typically the state with which we find them and what their frontline have to interact with when they're trying to make things happen. And it's that chaos and convoluted nature of systems, even with hiring the best people, we find that's quite a struggle to ensure that they can do standard work, consistent outcomes, and to get that visibility. So HINDSITE exists to pull all that together to improve that outcome, not just for the client, but ultimately for their stakeholders as well. And the challenge we found was that exists really across almost every client. And putting my BHP hat on, it's very difficult if you're then trying to adopt and work with these solutions and technologies with your own frontline challenges. And so HINDSITE can improve that outcome right across the value chain. So for Dan and the team today, I thought we'd set up the challenge, which is, Dan, I guess, paint us that story of the Michelin mining product and I guess what led you to finding us today.
Sure. Yeah, look, everybody might know the Michelin company is a tyre manufacturer and Bibendum, our mascot. And for a long time, we've been involved in the tyre space. And in the 70s, we moved into mining. And to do that, we have factories around the world producing components for those tyres and also the tyres themselves. And in the early 2000s, we invested in a services and solution model, really focused around our Michelin Better Mining approach, which is covering all aspects of a customer's operation, including the product, the support that we can offer, the solutions which we have, which are in my space, and the services tied into that as well too. And the whole aim is really around making our miners operate more safely, smartly, and more sustainable as well. To do that, we've got a range of offers within our services realm. Kling is one of those. Kling's a company we purchased in 2016 who operate in the software and also consulting space for tire bay management. And then within the Michelin ecosystem, MEMS 4 is our premium TPS, OTR TPMS. So it's the biggest TPMS for off-road vehicles in the world. We have about 5,000 trucks globally. And then under that, we have a subset of MEMS Lite, which is a lighter version of MEMS, comes at a reduced cost with some reduced features. And coming next year is a system called Better Haul Road, which will help our operators really focus on that safe, smart, and sustainable approach moving forward.
Nice one, Dan. So it's there's a lot there. The product itself delivers a lot of value for clients, but in order for that to be realized, obviously a lot of things have to go right. And in the mining environment, that's not always the case for a lot of those challenges. So I guess I wanted to pass it over to Rory to kick off the conversation and how we led from that point to where we are today. Take it away, Rory.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Liam, and of course, Dan, for being here today. Before I jump in, I will just put out a call to the audience as well, in the sense that we have purposely left time at the end for you to be able to ask ourselves, and Dan for that matter, any direct questions that you might have about the journey, the experience, the technology, etc. So please do start thinking about those in the back of your mind. There is a chat functionality and a messaging functionality. So there are a few ways that you can communicate those questions. Or if you're feeling particularly brave today, towards the end, you're welcome to unmute your mic and ask those questions directly. We're really here to dive straight into the juicy details. And that's why we're so excited to have Dan on the call, because, when Dan and the Michelin team first came to us, they was dealing with some challenges that I think a lot of service leaders in the audience and more broadly would probably recognize and are experiencing. I think what's really impressed me about Dan is the fact that he didn't just see the problem, he saw it as an opportunity to fundamentally change how their team operates, the services that they provide their customers. And so I think, Dan, my first sort of question that maybe you can share with the audience is, what was maybe that light bulb moment where you thought, okay, the old way of doing things just isn't cutting it? What was either that realization, a final straw, maybe something you saw happening or something you thought might happen in the future, and you're like, you know what, let's try and see if there's something we can do about this?
Yeah, Rory, good question. I think my first thought is it comes out of COVID, and it comes out of our partner company in Kling, who's a subsidiary of the Michelin Group, or Michelin Australia. And they did some really good work remotely in a mine in Mongolia from Tasmania. So somebody was sitting at a screen in Tasmania, and with a solution that HINDSITE offered then, being able to talk to somebody underground in Mongolia and take them through a safety process, assess what they were doing, and then provide real world and real-time feedback to them. And that's really what got me excited. But if I'm really honest, Rory, I've been in this business now for 6-7 years. And at the start, it was just me, literally covering the whole country. And I realized that I couldn't do it by myself. And as I developed the team to develop the business, I also realized that the team really didn't have enough resources, right? Within Michelin, we're a tire company, and this services arm is like a startup for us. So we haven't got the same sort of resources that maybe our truck and bus team do or our mining team do. Really, we needed assistance, and we needed help to be able to get those solutions or get our information out into the field. So that was really the main purpose of it.
Amazing.
And so then I guess picking that up, Dan, like when you were trying to do all of those things, obviously I know you guys are very customer centric. Were there any moments, or how did the focus on the end customer lead you to then, I guess, trying to do something about that?
Yeah, sure. I think probably
without naming names, because we know we all love BHP very much. Or
Look, I think whoever we're dealing with, look, I think probably the biggest signpost for me in this whole process was that we had our system deployed at a miner where they had a contractor in place. Okay. And that contractor was on that mine for a period of 3 or 4 years. And in a space of about 3 months, that contract ended and a new contractor came in. What we discovered is, we didn't discover that we knew this, we had to retrain that contractor on our system. Okay. And that meant touching 4 different crews, day shift, night shift, about the ongoing maintenance of the system and the general use of the platform as well too. So really what we found is that when that contractor left and those people left, the knowledge left with them, right? That was really detrimental to us. We saw a drop in performance of the system. But having I suppose a platform like HINDSITE means that we can retain the knowledge on site. It stays with the customer themselves, the purchaser of the system, and any new people coming in can be quickly upskilled on that as well too. So that was really the key for us, I think.
Yeah, I like that anecdote where in your case it was a whole contractor. I do remember trying to run teams out on site for using new technologies, and it would be that revolving door experience of the average tenure, I think, was like 9 months. And so exactly. Yes, it made it very hard. And of course, when you don't know how to do something,
sure,
you blame the technology, right? It's my TV's fault. I can never bloody find the right channel. I guess then from that, you maybe want to elaborate just a little bit, if I could, around like what made HINDSITE feel like a good fit decision, not just for that one anecdote, but then I guess for you and the team at a high level.
Sure. Yeah, I think
you could do anything. You could do anything. You could write more manuals. There's something you can always do something to solve that challenge.
Sure. Yeah, I think for us, it was really digitizing what we had in PDFs and the ability to be able to create that content library, which I'll admit took a while for my team to get their head around. But once we did, the value in that content library and the use that they're getting out of it now it's a fundamental part of our business, right? So I think the old way of moving from sending somebody an email with a PDF, which I'll take out into the field and maybe lose, or a page falls out and they don't have the correct process, to be able to digitize the whole process and have everything laid out in a guided workflow instruction to the teams makes the process so much easier. And for us, it's delivered in results as far as performance of the system, but also customer satisfaction as well too, which is vital if we want to continue to grow the business into the future years.
Yeah, Dan, I think I remember when we first started working together, that document, I think, was about 70 pages. And that's pretty hard, right? If you've got an issue and you don't know where to start and you've got a 70-page document in front of you, how do you get that solved quickly? The other thing is that your product is always changing and evolving, right? You're releasing new versions, updates, different configurations, depending on what version of the system your customer is on. And so again, that's really difficult then to make sure that person on the ground is using the right version of that document. And when you are having to have your customers do their own sort of service and maintenance, and that they're an important part of that process, not having access to that then means that they've got to come back to your team. It's got to be in the right hours. They might not communicate the problem to you correctly. So then you're not actually solving the problem you thought you were trying to solve. And ultimately, it's performance again that gets impacted.
Absolutely. And I think that's probably really highlighted in the fact that you're right. We have different versions of the platform. We have different types of customers. We have integrated or on-premise customers, and we have customers that are in the cloud. And sometimes they're running different versions of the system, different software versions, which may have different features. And being able to tailor our workflows that we can send through to those locations that are specific to them, and even down to the point, Rory, of having photos of their truck or their installation in their machine. We're not giving them a generic picture. We're giving them the actual vision of what they're seeing right in front of them. So yeah, that's probably the most integral thing that it's been really helpful for us. But more importantly, the guys in the field feel confident when they go to the machine, they understand what they're looking at and how to interpret the messages that they're getting from our platform as well.
Absolutely. And I think your team has been empowered to own that for their customers as well. They know what's best for their customers, and the fact that there is then essentially a managed platform where they can leverage the Michelin way of doing things, but then make those personalizations, I think, goes a really long way. But That's obviously an example of something, a success story. And you've already touched a little bit on maybe some of, I guess, the challenges, because I think transformation isn't always a straight line. It goes up and down over time. And I think we can say that we have had some bumps along the way or some slow points where maybe I've wanted you to go faster, but then as a business operationally, there's so many different things going on all of the time that makes that more difficult than you probably think it should be. So what are maybe some of the things, and I want you to be very honest, what are maybe some of the things that you thought were harder than it would be as part of this process?
Okay. I can be honest, Rory. I think for us, probably the initial phase, you helped us through this, and thank you for that. Really, that content creation, right? Our system has many different parts, has many different communication methods, and being able to document that in that document library was probably the toughest part. And I think it took us really, I'm going to say maybe 8 months to get it done. And we're still updating that as we go through today. So that was probably the most complex part, and really trying to get the guys to understand culturally. There's a bit of a cultural change within our team, right? The team will always, hey, we need to be in the field with our customer to be able to service them, and maybe changing that mindset to say, hey, maybe you don't need to be out in the field as much. Maybe we can lower the risk of you working on a mine site or driving to that mine site by producing this content library that you can send out remotely. And to that, we've seen some really good savings in SG&A for travel and for spend on hotels and flights. And so there's some benefits on the back end for us as well. But really, we've been able to take the guys out and remove the risk, which has been really important.
Yeah, and I think maybe a good just clarification for the audience as well is that it wasn't we start together on day one and then 8 months later we had an outcome that we could deploy. It was a continuous kind of journey of building something, deploying it, seeking feedback, improving. And I think the team did a great job of sticking with that, even if at some points along the way, particularly because, Dan, you've got a mix of some younger people who are coming into the industry. You've also got some people who have been in the industry for a really long time and are used to doing things in a very specific way. And so it was bringing those people along on the journey throughout it, wasn't it?
It was absolutely, yes. There are young and old in my team. I think with your help, Rory, and by keeping at it, we've been able to convert those naysayers into believers and now even advocates, because they realize the benefits for them, for work-life balance and for safety as well too. So it's been a journey for sure.
Absolutely.
I'll jump in there just from a challenge perspective, and I love your focus on your people, Dan. But I also know that our friends in the Tyre Bay are your client, right? And so how did you go all those challenges with having them interact with this to ultimately drive a better outcome? Because my experience with our friends in the Tyre Bay is that they're not technologists. If you were to find the technologists out on site, they're least likely to be in the Tyre Bay. And if that was your decision to use a technology approach to improve that service delivery, describe us those dots being connected. Because I expect that would be a pretty good keen learning for other providers.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point, Rory. Sorry, Liam, when we initially deployed, and you're right, typically your Tyre Bay fitter is not really interested in picking up an iPad and entering some data or going through a workflow. They want to be on the tools, doing the job that they're passionate about. We split it in two ways. We actually took our workflow idea to the communication teams on site, okay, people who are actually doing the ongoing maintenance of the system, really trying to go to the point of where we can make the biggest impact first. Okay. And those were those communication teams, those maintenance teams around the ongoing maintenance of the system. And then for our Tyre Bay teams, we've had a bit of a different approach, and it's been slowly trying to pick out the points where we can introduce it that would bring them value and potentially save them time. Yeah. So it's been a journey for sure. And I think we've learned a lot along the way. But yeah, being able to differentiate, finding those work groups in the mine that look after maintenance and ongoing maintenance for the system, and then slowly approaching those other, maybe those laggers who really are a little bit difficult to adopt as well.
How long before you had this is working? You know what I mean? Like when did you get some positive feedback? Because I work with places where you do a software transformation, and what that really means is we'll see those people in 2 years, and what they deliver will be it's a roll of the dice.
Sure.
Yeah, I know you highlighted a little bit about that iteration, but maybe just giving us a bit more context there would be helpful.
Yeah, sure. I mentioned in the promo video we did for Hindsight that we had an uptick in both sensor and transceiver performance. Okay, but when it really clicked for me is that we had an operator at a BHP mine in Western Australia use one of our workflows to do a really complicated process at 1 a.m. in the morning. Okay, this is something that generally my guys probably would need, let's say, 3 to 4 months of training and on-the-job training to understand what could go wrong during this process. But this operator who had just come to the mine was working with a competitive TPMS system. 1 o'clock in the morning at a BHP mine, had never seen MEMS before, did a super complicated process in 15 minutes. And that was like the light bulb for me. I was like, this is amazing. This is great. Like, the person solved the problem at 1 a.m. The truck went back to work. The customer's happy. The perception of MEMS is great. So for me, that was really the key point.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah.
The other thing, Dan, is I guess that feedback that your team then also got about that issue that was experienced on site. Is that an issue specific to that site versus other sites, bringing all that data into one system, even where it's like self-guided and self-directed? That sort of allowed you to identify connections and things like that as well.
Yeah, we've taken some of that, Rory, you're right. So from one customer's to another, potentially where we're seeing issues being reported on Hindsight during the inspection process or during a guided workflow, we can make the link to other customers because they're generally all operating the same. And if we have a customer that's potentially maybe not on Hindsight, that we can introduce the platform to fix that problem also as well too, it just makes sense for us as well. So it's a great addition to our business. And like I said, our guys can't be everywhere all the time. We just simply don't have the resources, but digitizing all those workflows means that we can share it across all of our customer base as well too.
That's awesome, Dan. Before we jump into, I guess, I know you mentioned a little bit about maybe some of those uptimes and performance, which I might have you repeat, and if we talk about impact and results. But Rory, was there anything else? Were we going to do a poll, perhaps, just to engage the audience a little bit before we jump into that? We'll let Dan have a sip of water before his interrogation continues.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we've got a poll just popping up on the screen. You'll be able to see the details there. But from an audience perspective, it's really interesting for us to hear other perspectives on what potentially the biggest concern or issues or points that are stopping you from maybe going down digital transformation, a digital service delivery approach. There's a couple of pretty common ones in the list that we have selected there. So Dan really spoke already about technician buy-in. Obviously, there are other tools or systems or ways that you can solve that problem. How do you find the right partner? Implementation and change management is something that is obviously a pretty big part of that process and something that we focus a lot on. Sometimes you've got to prove that ROI. If you're going to make a time and cost investment, what are you actually going to get out of that? And then going back to Liam's original concept of chaos, how do we make sure that any new systems that you integrate do fit in with your other systems? So please feel free to answer the poll. This information is really useful and interesting for us to review, and certainly sharing these insights with the broader community is also really helpful. Thank you so much, and we'll probably come back to the results at the end.
Awesome. I thought then, while it's playing in, and I believe you need to pull out your phone and scan a QR code, because of course you do in 2025. I guess the next part we want to talk about, I guess, was the impact and results. So we've spoken about you don't get a login to a piece of software and your problems magically disappear. It does require that approach. And I think I was hearing that collaborative approach to doing that, which sounds like you took with your customers, which with Rory and her team took with yourself, Dan. But what does the story, you step back and the journey's been 12, 24 months. What does that look like when you have to go back to your bosses and say, this is what I've been up to, and this is why it matters?
Sure. Yeah, good question, Liam. I'm one of the philosophy of don't ask for permission, ask forgiveness. So for me, Hindsight was the right thing to do. And when I fully understood the concept and how it could potentially change the way that we work with our customer, I was all in. I put through a purchase order without asking and got it approved, and have continued to done so as well too. But really, when I was just looking at these figures before, the return on investment is there from an SG&A side. Like I said before, our team are not traveling as much, which is It's good for them. It's good for their work-life balance. It's great for our CO2 emissions as a company. But it means we really ultimately we can deliver to our customer a much better service as well too. And so there's a saving on the SG&A side. It's significant, more than what I'm paying Hindsight, but I won't tell you what it is because we're coming to that point where we're talking about next year. But really, I think the main thing is it's really helped us on probably two other fronts. One is that the perception of us to the customer, okay, we're seen as professional, we're seen as having a digitized space where their employees or their contractors can interact with our system and get the information that they need. And then secondly, when we go to tender as well too, Hindsight is something that we're talking about. So not only are we giving them the system, but we're also giving them the information that their guys need in the field to fix the problem then and there. And like I said, my team can't be everywhere, but really we can empower them to power the customer to run the system that they purchase from us, and we help them with the guidance and maintenance of it. But really, we're not there every day, and the ability to, in tenders, be able to put that forward and say, hey, not only will you get the platform, but you'll also get this whole digital library that we keep updated and that we will share with your teams as well too.
Yeah, we will forget all of that when it comes to contract renewal. But I really appreciate the candor there, Dan. I think ultimately for our business, we've got three values. The first one is customer wins are our wins. And truthfully, Rory, myself, all of us get out of bed because we want to deliver those outcomes for yourself and our other clients. And it goes beyond just being customer centric, right? It's like you if you're not winning, then it's like our working together has an impact, right?
It's got to be win. Customer wins, we win, and you win as well too. So if we can get that, I think then only good things are going to happen.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Rory's next question yours, so I'm going to take it direct.
Absolutely. So I guess, Dan, thank you so much for being generous with your time today. I think if I think of some of the results that you've talked about, it's obviously we've got travel improvements, customer improvements in terms of that point of differentiation. I know you're working in some trials and things like that at the moment where you're putting your best foot forward. And there's obviously been those uptime metrics and things like that that I think really deliver, as you say, win for everyone involved. Is there anything else that was potentially an operational headache that you didn't think or know that even just going digital would solve?
That's a good question, Rory. That's a very good question. For me, and I mentioned this before, it has to be the access to the information, right? Yep. The ability for us to be able to centralize that information and then share it with our customers. Before it was in a PDF, it didn't make sense. It was clunky. It didn't work for my guys, nor did it work for the customer. And the reason that we partner with Hindsight is that really you are the experts in this space. Michelin's a big company. I think we have 150,000 employees around the world. We could have done this ourselves. Okay, I could have found it. I'm sure I could have found a team within Michelin to help me develop this. But really, assessing that, looking internally and also externally, Hindsight were the best in that. So that's why we partnered with you, and we continue to do so moving forward.
Yeah, fantastic. And I guess maybe coming to the end of our formal questions, because as I flagged, we want to see if there's questions from the audience. But what would you say, Dan, to someone who's on the call or someone who's going to watch the recording later about why should they take the leap? What was some wisdom that you can potentially share with someone who's sitting there thinking, should I do this? Is this something that I should solve now? Is it like a Q4 2026 type thing? Yeah, what were maybe some advice or some wisdom that you'd share with someone who was maybe thinking about this, or even if they hadn't thought about it, maybe start that brain ticking on why they should move from paper or chaos or whatever system they're using currently?
Yeah, sure. Good question, Rory. For me, I think the world's evolving, the world's changing. And if I think about the people that I've hired and may hire in the future, it's a different subset of people and a different generation that's coming in. And it's interesting. And I think we have to adapt to them. And for me, people really important in my team, keeping my guys safe and reducing the risk. I would hate for one of my guys to go to a mine site and get injured and potentially be off work or something more serious. So really the ability for me to reduce the risk for them is probably the most important thing. And we've shown that with the reduced travel to site and being on site, and we still have that customer intimacy. And really what it's allowed us to do is switch. So instead of being that on-site person on the tools, really switching into maybe more analysis. How can they bring more value to the customer, and how they can better serve the system that's actually on their site? I suppose to summarize, happy to take calls from anybody. If anybody wants to speak to me about this, we can take this offline and I can take you through why and how, and potentially some of the results that we've achieved as well too. But yeah, that's what I'll say.
Yeah, amazing. I know some of your team just recently having to spend multiple days traveling to site just to get there for certain parts. That just takes them out of providing that extra value that you're seeing that you can do with data, that you can do remotely, that you can do with analytics now. And so doing that when it's still required, because absolutely site travel and being in front of your teams and customers is still really important. But what can you do with the extra time? Very cool. Fantastic. Liam, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
I was going to maybe bring it back to the poll that we conducted from our audience. It looks like the clear winner, if you will, from a concern was that implementation and change management from the front line or the customer or the client, depending on the application. And I guess, Dan, if you were to reflect back on it, like what was one of the things that moved the needle the most around? Obviously, you've said that it's been worth it, but if you were to think about what would make the journey easier for someone else who's looking to start it when it comes to implementation and change management, is there something there that you'd leave people with? Definitely.
Yeah, I think going through this process, and yeah, if I think back to the first time that we introduced this to a customer, okay, and we did it at a maintenance manager level, and his words to me were, "This makes sense. It's easy to understand. You've already built the content library. You can share things on the fly. You can adapt and change in their environment." And you've got to think that on these machines, sometimes there's 10 or 15 different systems, all with different protocols and all with different communication methods. So being able to empower their teams to focus on what needs to be done then and there when the truck is there is probably the most important thing. So I'll go back to that comment about the maintenance superintendent who said to me, "Dan, this just makes sense. It makes sense for me and for my team and for you guys as well too." So that's probably the key takeaway that I'll leave with everybody. But again, I'm happy to take any questions, and even offline if somebody wants to reach out as well.
Very generous, as ever, Dan. Look, I think just looking at some questions from people in the audience, and I guess one here is sent from me, just on that change management approach there, Dan, is the culture of work for your teams, and if that's been adjusted in the course now of when you're looking to maybe attract new talent, or being able to make sure that you've got that redundancy there as well.
Yeah, really good point, Liam. For me, like I mentioned to Rory before, we've got young people in my team, guys with families at home, kids at school, wives at work, and some older guys in the team who want to be at home. They don't necessarily want to travel so much, but still enjoy being on the tools and interacting with customers. That change management process for my team has been beneficial. There's a lot more work-life balance now within my team, and the ability for these guys to not be traveling every single week. They can plan their weeks or their months out a little bit better about who they're going to visit and when, but also be heaps more targeted in their process and really focus on that if there is change management on site, they can really focus on that one customer or that one project that they're working on. And for our customers, I think the way that we were able to introduce it to them by giving them simple links that they can put in their SAP workflows that could be clicked on and they can produce the PDF document. That's probably been the fundamental thing about integrating that into the customer's operation, has been really simple. A simple link that we get from the system, they can print off the document or they can take it with them on the tablet and they've got everything that they need going into the field to be able to solve the problem.
Besides the $1 million comment, which I'll definitely remember, is the fact Dan's in a 150,000 person business, but his team are responsible for hundreds of sites, but they have to do that with 6 people. So you think whilst it's a global business, it's a small team that needs to feel like a global business. And as a small business, we know the challenge of trying to feel like a global business despite only having a small team. And so I think that alignment there, one reason why we think what we've designed and how we approach this is enterprise grade, but small business ready. How does HINDSITE's offer pair with Michelin? What is that client, the end client value proposition when you talk to them about having that hindsight capability, Dan?
Yeah, it's a good question. I suppose there's benefits for us too as a business, right? As I said before, everything was PDF'd and a little bit complicated. So the idea to digitize everything and keep it in that hindsight space makes it nice and easy. But really for the customer, it comes down to quite often these machines will come in, they'll do a pre-maintenance inspection at maybe a week before the truck comes in. And when the truck comes in, it's there for 12 hours and then that's it, production wanted back. So really the ability for the customer to have all the information that they need, and then even sometimes on the fly, maybe they're 8 hours into that maintenance issue section, and I've got a call to one of my guys saying, hey, I've got a problem with the MEM system. I'm seeing this. Can you help me? And instead of somebody talking them remotely through on the phone, the guys are able to send off those guided workflow instructions via a link. Somebody can log into it, or they can direct them to it in the Hindsight app, which they'll have on some of the tablets of the operations that we have, and take them straight to the problem, to the fix for the problem. And instead of holding that truck up or that maintenance item getting missed and potentially being booked in 700 or 800 hours later, it's done then and there. So really for the customer, it's about results and keeping the uptime of the system where it should be. 95% we aim for both our transceivers and also for our sensors as well too. Yeah.
Nice one. Thank you, Dan. One more question. To ensure a good change management, it's necessary to update the operating model or procedures, or in order to get a good adoption in terms of those new ways of working. So did it require you to update your operating model, or did you use it as an opportunity to improve your procedures, Dan?
It's exactly what we did, Liam. We used it as a way to improve our procedures. Really, the building of the content library, the ability to share certain workflows to certain customers based on their current setup and their operation, we were really able to tailor that solution to each individual mine and each individual machine and each individual piece of equipment on that machine as well too. So it really helped us digitize that process all the way through, deliver a better level of service to the customer, and really empower our guys to make quick decisions and important ones for the customer that keep the system running and the customer happy as well.
The other
Rory,
thing, Dan, I'm sorry, I was just going to add, as part of this process, I think what we identified, and I don't think you'd have an issue with me sharing this, is that on some parts of the process, people were in your team doing things differently as well, right? So the job that they were doing, the advice that they were providing customers was varied. And sometimes that's required based, again, as you said, systems, fleet, other configurations, site by site. But also at a certain point, you want to make sure that every customer is getting that same Michelin expertise level experience. And so it's also important to make sure that your team is doing it the same consistent way. And I remember some of those early conversations where we were going back and forth on what that right way was, based on experience, based on best practice, based on all of those options. And so that was another thing that I think was a really good activity to do, regardless of whether it was hindsight or not, that then allowed you to come together as a team and say, okay, great, within the parameters that we know, this is how we operate. We're going to set that standard. Then our customers, new people who you've had come into the team, then learn from that same standard as well.
Exactly. Yeah, it's been a great training tool for anybody that's come on board to the team. But you're right, that standardization was important. If I think back in our platform, perhaps maybe there's two ways to do the same thing, but one's more convoluted than the other. So the ability to standardize the way that we do work across our group, and if we're all doing the same, then we're all pushing in the same direction. And I'm just looking at our performance figures here, and you can certainly see that there was a point where things clicked, and we saw the increase in both of our truck uptime and also sensor uptime as well too. And the continuation of that standard that we hold today is keeping that performance where it is. And it's not decreasing, it's in fact going up. So it's good for us and it's good for the customer.
I might call it there on that high note. I appreciate, Dan, your time. Indeed, everyone who joined in on the call today. Appreciate those who sent through questions. I think the reality is that we talk about digital transformation, but we understand though that that's not everyone's every day. And so being able to make that achievable and bite-sized and incremental is, I think, is as much the challenge as ensuring that the solution is a good fit to deliver value. And I'm always love hearing the partnership approach and obviously the successful outcomes from doing so, but recognizing that there have been bumps along the way into making that a success. So a big thank you to Dan and your team. We're very passionate about the partnership that we've put out, and that case study that you were good enough to participate in, we're really proud of. And Rory and obviously her team as well, from the consistent application of trying to push, but also guide and support. Look, thank you everybody who joined today. If you have any further questions, Dan mentioned a couple of times that he was happy to be connected with directly, and I can affirm he's a generous soul. Ditto for Rory and myself. Any further questions, or if we need to clarify anything, we're always happy to have this. The Work Better webinar is a conversation. I think making these things achievable rather than scary or monolithical is our mission. And so we really thank you for participating in the conversation. For everybody, enjoy your slow walk towards a Christmas break. Stay safe. And if you are running hard at it, look after yourself. Thank you very much, everybody.